I'm Tom Landon. Tonight we ask what it takes to dance through life. Sometimes you meet someone and wonder, how did I not already know about that person? One of the best parts of hosting a show is the chance you get to sit down with remarkable people. My guest tonight is Keith Lee, who when he was born in the Bronx might have seemed an unlikely person to become one of America's finest dancers and later a much sought after choreographer and filmmaker whose work has been performed all over the world as part of the American Ballet Theater, Alvin Ailey's dance company, and on Broadway. He's been a presence in Virginia as a choreographer in Lynchburg, Winchester, and Charlottesville. He joins me today to talk about his life in dance. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for having me on the show.
I'm so glad to have you here, and I said this before we started recording, but I feel a little unqualified to talk about dance, and I think that's true of a lot of Americans. Is it's just of the fine arts, it's something that's a little harder, I think, not for us to appreciate, but sometimes to understand and to think about all the things that go into it. I'm really glad to have you here to talk about that.
Oh, my pleasure.
As I said in the introduction, you were born in the Bronx, and you started dancing as a pretty young boy. Is that correct?
Yes, my grandmother, used to watch the Sunday shows on our big console television at home, the Ed Sullivan Show, Ted Mack, that kind of entertainment stuff, and she really had it in mind for me to become one of those kinds of people in showbiz. So, I was a showbiz kid, starting at about 3 years old on Flatbush Avenue at the Little Theater School, and Joni Edwards, my first teacher, is still around and about, and this is great. It's been a great life.
And I think, one of the advantages of being born in such a cultural center as New York City probably gave you access to things that might be tougher for other kids born in America to access some of those real professionals.
Well, it's very interesting, growing up in Bedford-Stuy, Brooklyn, and, I had the support of my friends, and my grandmother used to give me a quarter to ride the bus, and I wouldn't take the bus, I would walk, and I would go get a slice of pizza, But I would get to my place of learning, and, we were taught how to sing, dance, and act and enunciate our words. So it was the whole ball of wax and entertainment. But I had gotten most of my real training at the High School of Performing Arts in Manhattan.
Which is a place we've heard about before, but tell, for our viewers who might not know what that is, tell me a little bit.
Fame.
Right.
We're gonna live forever. So on 46th Street, between 6th and 7th Avenue. Now it has moved over to Lincoln Center, and it's now called the LaGuardia School of the Arts.
But a place where just countless stars in many different disciplines have come from, right?
Yes.
So that gave you an exposure to people at the top of their game as a pretty young person, right? You got to appreciate what professionalism is. Well,
having gone to that school at the Little Theater, and I had some of those basics in dance, but I was going more the theater route, and somehow Ben Vereen saw me, and he had mentioned to me that I should go to the High School of Performing Arts, and it was there where, we learned how to straighten our legs and really stretch, and got all the fundamentals in dance in both ballet and modern, and East Indian, Kathakali, Bharatanatyam, and flamenco. We had everything there.
And, do you remember a moment, you talk about this, our powerful grandmothers who can guide us in interesting ways, but do you remember a moment that for you it kind of clicked that this is what I'm supposed to be doing?
Well, I realized that I had no choice because, grandma, whatever grandma said, my Nana, whatever she said, I had to do. And I obeyed her and I loved her very much. And that's why I'm still in the business today, because she did so much for me to be able to dance and washing other people's clothes. We didn't have much money. But fortunately, when I was at the High School of Performing Arts, I had gone all up and down the streets to every dance school there was, and I obtained scholarships to SAB, School of American Ballet, Harkness House for Ballet Arts. So I can go down the list, and the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. So these places, you know, had open doors, and I was able to go in and take it all in.
Do you feel, I know today when I look at kids who specialize early in, it might be a sport, or, you know, I think today it's much more common for kids to kind of pursue something like lacrosse or soccer, kind of at the expense of everything else. Did you also have a relatively normal neighborhood growing up?
Yeah, my dad was a director at the Boys Welcome Hall, which later became the Police Athletic League. And there were lots of guys there that were very, very talented. And you know, you have to have good movement potential to be hitting that ping pong ball back and forth across the table, and good reflexes. And whether it's, you know, table hockey or basketball, a lot of those kinds of things. And you know, a lot of kids, you know, out there on the streets are so talented. And you know, I've gone to parks and recreation centers, and I've taught at little projects, you know, in grassy knolls in the heat of the day. And teaching kids is what I do. So I love the dance, and I want to give back.
Right. You know, one of the things that strikes me is that when adults pay attention to children and give them praise for something they're doing well, it can change the whole trajectory of a kid's life. You know, I'm sure you've had that experience as a teacher.
Yeah, well, there's old school and then there's new school. The old school was the school of hard knocks, but now it's really kind of mellow, and there's a nice communication with children, which I happen to love. And you know, it's so tender, the moments that we spend with our children and the people in our communities, so that we communicate, because culturally, dance is a wonderful communicator.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the world of ballet that you entered into, as I don't know how old were you when you started really seriously dancing ballet?
Well, about 14. 13, okay. I was in the high school, actually 12 and a half, I was the high school performing arts, but you know, 13, 14, I was drafted into the ballet department as well, so I had double service.
Always a demand for male dancers in the ballet, right?
Yes, definitely.
But ballet has this reputation of being pretty strict, formalized. There are different kinds of teaching, as I understand it, but it's all pretty rigid. Did you experience that as a young person, kind of trying to make sense of what it would be like to have a life in ballet?
Yes, you know, it was definitely a challenge I didn't accept right away.
Tell me about that. Where was a moment of rebellion?
Well, you know, sometimes I would escape the ballet class, and I would go down the hallway, down the stairs, and Keith, get back here to class, you know. So I knew that when they shouted my name, it was time for me to come back up, and they found me.
Right.
But then, you know, it's not what you know. It's what you learn. It's what you have to learn. And from that discipline comes freedom. So in learning all of the dance vocabulary, no, it wasn't easy, but you start catching on, and you do get a lot of support from your peers.
Right. Well, you mentioned the name Ben Vereen as someone who noticed you. I'm sure that name, I mean, I know that name, but that carries a lot of weight and as you moved up, it sounds like you kept coming in contact with people who encouraged you to continue.
Yes, a lot of support, yeah.
And, you know, still though, you're a young person in high school. You had your grandmother's support. Were there others encouraging you? You know, you need to find something more practical to do to learn a trade or?
It was never a question. It was never a doubt. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I would use every resource I had to learn and to get to my classes.
Yeah, and as a teacher, what do you say to young people who come to you with that sort of same thing? Yeah, this is what I want to do, but I also feel like I should study, double major in business or whatever it might be, so they can be practical.
I think that's a good idea. It's always good to have something kind of on the side just in case. And, dance is such a big business now, and, administratively, and, whether you're doing outreach or, you're in the studio teaching or you're busy dancing or you're coaching, or if you're managing a building or if you're a scenic designer or a stage manager. There's a lot to theater, and there's a lot that you can do.
Well, and it is competitive. So, and it's very much a meritocracy, right? There are lots of other opportunities to remain in dance, even or theater or whatever, even if you can't be on that stage. Before we talk about sort of how you made some of the decisions to make later to go into choreography, especially. Give me sort of the highlights. As a dancer, where did you get to go? What are some things that you lay in bed at night and go, oh, that was a great experience?
Right after high school, I had 2 different contracts. I had a contract from Arthur Mitchell to dance with the Dance Theater of Harlem, and I also had a contract from the American Ballet Theater. And so I had to weigh which one I was going to take.
Both excellent possibilities.
Both great organizations, and Donald Sadler, who was an ex-ABT soloist, is the one who kind of helped me find my way to American Ballet Theater. At the end of the day, I had a very difficult decision. I chose the American Ballet Theater because I felt that was going to be a bigger challenge for me, and the repertory was a little bit more expansive.
How old were you when you made that choice?
17.
Wow.
So I was in American Ballet Theater when I was 17 years old, and I had 1 week to learn different repertory pieces like Theme and Variations, Balanchine, and Billy the Kid, Eugene Loring, and some of the big ballets, Miss Julie by Bridget Colbert. And at the end of that week, we were going to Europe. Now, I'd never been to Europe.
Did you have a passport?
They had told me actually at the beginning of the week to send off for one. And I was able to get one from Washington, D.C. right away.
And had other family members of yours, were they passport holders? Had your family traveled?
No, I was really the first one of my family to travel.
I bet Nana was pretty proud at that moment.
She was. She was.
And so you went to Europe, and how many times did your eyes, how wide did your eyes get?
My eyes lit up everywhere I went, whether it, in London, and just walking around, having some fish and chips, and just feeling the people of London, and being around the Palladium and seeing the crown jewels, and going from there to Nice, France, and different parts of France, Celebes, and it's just a world unto itself.
And so you spend in that role, and I use the role as, I didn't mean to use the word role, but whatever. In the roles that you're playing, there are sort of set pieces that are the big pieces of the ballet repertoire that everybody's expected to learn. And I guess as you learn them, you're also being compared to every person who's ever danced them in the past. What did you try to bring to some of the iconic roles that you were able to play to dance?
Well, there was no one like me in American Ballet Theater. I was the first black dancer
Really?
to dance.
What year
with
was that?
Well, I'm to have a permanent contract. There were others who were guest artists, and there was Judith Jameson, Cleo Quitman, a lot of wonderful dancers had guested and had did some ballets by Agnes DeMille, the Four Marys, things like that. And I had a permanent contract, which was different. So that basically made me a member, an active member of American Ballet Theater. And I was the first soloist to dance with the company. But when you talk about repertory, tradition, it's one of the companies that has some of the greatest traditions in the world in dance. The Giselles, the Swan Lakes, and there are ballet aficionados that come to see the performances, and they're well educated in what they're seeing. So there's no skimping on the family recipe.
Right, I guess not. Now, what is I like an elite athlete, a dancer, I mean, it's hard on your body, right? So how did you experience injury? How did you overcome that? And performing things I don't know how often you have to perform these pieces when you're out on a tour like that, but what was that toll like on your body?
You have to take good care of yourself. You have to watch what you eat. You have to get your rest, and basically you're doing something like 3 ballets a night, 2 or 3 ballets a night at least. You're in class in the morning, sometimes a 9 o'clock class, usually a 10 o'clock class when you're out there on the road. And then you have a day of rehearsal, which leads to your performances. You finish your performances and then you start all over again. So you have to take care of yourself. You have to know when to say when and say, body, rest. Lay down, put your legs up, eat right, and then gauge yourself in a therapeutic type of frame of mind and stretch and relaxation to take care of your body.
Did you have people telling in your ear right from the start, look, if you want to do this, here's a routine that I followed that I found to be helpful in longevity?
Not exactly. Not back then, but there were chiropractors at the Harkness House for Ballet Arts. There were jacuzzi whirlpools. There were masseurs that were on the premises. So, we did have help.
So you were, you got very much, it's very analogous, I think, to like what I think about an elite athlete, basketball player, football player, going into the training room afterwards and people descending on them so they'll be ready for the next game.
Absolutely.
One of the issues of becoming a dancer, I would think, is that toll that it does take on your body and your mind too, to be sharp all the time. But I don't know if there's an average, or what did you feel like was the time stamp that goes on you when you start dancing that seriously, that young? How long could you expect to keep something like that?
I stopped dancing when I was 25, but I stopped to learn more. I stopped to learn more about the teaching, the craft of teaching, the craft of choreography. Right. And that was something I was always interested in. So then, doing 7 years with the American Ballet Theater, I felt like I had done my job, and I was ready to do some other stuff going in my own direction.
It's hard to know when the time is to make that decision, right? I mean, I'm sure you were thinking about it for a while. This is getting harder, I'm enjoying it less, and also I've got some ideas. Was that what went into your decision to become a choreographer?
I think what went into my decision was really wanting to say some things myself. I really wanted to have a voice in dance, and I did want to work with different companies and with different dancers, and to have that kind of independence to free fall in the world of the arts. And I like all kinds of arts.
Sure, and when you've been operating at that high level, I imagine that when it was time for you to start saying what you wanted to say on stage, was there internal pressure on your part that this has to be really good? Because, I know what great is.
I was ready because, you know, I had my first concert. Even when I was in ballet theater, I was already choreographing. And I had choreographed 2 ballets on American Ballet Theater when I was 19 years old. So I was well kind of on my way in speaking and making my own narrative. That was very, very important.
Was there a time when you felt like the dancing was taking away from your ability to express that other side of your creativity, and that it was time to make the jump?
No,
No?
because inside of the life, autobiographically, we all have different nuances and different speech patterns, and different rhythms and different approaches to how we live.
And this is a big question that we could probably do hours of television on, but choreography is kind of its own language, right? Am I thinking correctly about that? And how do you explain that to someone here's your chance to explain that to someone who's not a dancer? Like, I've heard that said before. Well, choreography is it's got its own language and dialects and everything else. Is there a simple way that you can explain that to me?
No. Basically there are 2 different kinds of choreography. There's abstract and then there's programmatic. Either you're telling a story or you're not telling a story and you want to be abstract. So you have different kinds of choices. Your narrative and movement all the time should match exactly what you're trying to project with your process to the audience, and choosing your music and then sticking with your game plan and getting it done.
You were featured in an exhibit, I guess it was an exhibit, but certainly featured by the Museum of African American Dance, and honored your work as an artist laureate, a choreography, and as a master teacher. Of those 3, sort of artist, choreographer, and teacher, which of those, is there one that you more identify with, or are they all woven into one?
They're really all woven into one. One hand washes the other. I think the artist laureate title or the artist laureate life enables me to do other things that I'm very, very interested in. And I find that being a master gardener, getting my hands in the soil and whatever I choose to do in looking at sculptural designs and different puzzles and even these wonderful ornaments on the table, which are very geometric in their shapes. You study and you see all the things, the grains inside of this flooring, is creative, whoever did that. So art is around us.
Yeah. We've got a few minutes, 2.5 minutes left or so. Tell me, we've talked a lot about your past, but I know you've done a lot since you've been in Virginia, and I would just encourage people to Google Keith Lee, choreographer, and you'll learn about a lot of this stuff. But anything you're doing now that, is exciting to you?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm director of diversity with the Charlottesville Ballet, and I'm also a resident choreographer with the Charlottesville Ballet, and so that's a great outlet. And I've actually worked with the Charlottesville Ballet for over 15 years, and I'm just in awe of that organization and the wonderful directors, Emily Mott and Sarah Jensen.
I know Emily
Claiborne.
Mott, yeah.
So they're
She's from Roanoke, by the way.
Yes, and that's the first time. That's where I met her, was here in Roanoke when she was a little girl. She worked with me. Yeah. With the Roanoke Ballet years ago.
And so Lynchburg is sort of your base of operations now. What appeals to you about being in Lynchburg when you're traveling?
The Blue Ridge, and after being to the moors in Scotland, I feel as though our Blue Ridge Mountains are just as beautiful.
Yeah, we are very lucky to live here, and it's to be able to be from here and then poke your way out and into the world must be in the last few seconds we have, just what do you want people to know about dance if they've got a budding dancer at home or they want to support dance? What are your thoughts there?
Dance is for everybody, and I mean everybody. Older people like myself now to very, very, very young people. It's for everybody. Just put one foot in front of the other. There is so much to enjoy. Put the music on and move around. Find your way to the studios. Share the movement and love for the dance and the arts with each other in your community.
Well, that's all we have time for, and great advice. And as we close the program, I just want to thank Mr. Lee for making the trek from Lynchburg to share his stories. For What It Takes, I'm Tom Landon.